A quiet Tennessee pit stop turned into a national firestorm. A racist cop ignored valid military credentials, mocked a black Air Force general, and slammed her against her own car. But seconds later, dispatch confirmed the Pentagon was listening, and the officer's career unraveled in real time. The video went viral, leaving the country stunned. What went down in Fairview, and how did one call change everything? Before we explore the story, get comfortable, hit like, and subscribe for more powerful stories just like this. The sun hung low over the rolling hills of Tennessee, casting long shadows across Highway 70 as Major General Karen Whitaker steered her rented Ford sedan through the quiet stretch of Fairview. She was on her way to Arnold Air Force Base, about 60 miles southeast, for a classified briefing on missile defense systems. At 50, Karen had seen her share of high-stakes missions, from deployments in the Middle East to late-night strategy sessions at the Pentagon. But today wasn't about flashing lights or a convoy. It was just her, a plane car, and a tight deadline. She wore jeans, a navy windbreaker, and a baseball cap pulled low over her short braids. Nothing to hint at her rank or the weight of her responsibilities. Her secure phone, tucked in the passenger seat, buzzed faintly as she glanced at the dashboard clock. Time was slipping away. Somewhere between Manchester and Fairview, the signal bars on her phone dropped to nothing. Karen frowned, tapping the screen. She needed to make a call to the Department of Defense, not in an hour, not when she got to the base. Right now. The briefing couldn't wait. She scanned the road, her eyes landing on a faded sign for Pritchard's Quick Stop, a small convenience store just off the highway. The gravel lot was uneven, the building's paint peeling, but it would do. Karen pulled in, parking near a rusted payphone at the edge of the lot, away from the front door where a couple of locals lingered, sipping sodas and chatting in the late afternoon heat. She didn't give them a second thought. To her, this was just a pit stop, a place to get a clear signal and move on. She stepped out of the car, the warm September air sticking to her skin, and grabbed her secure phone. Standing by the hood, she raised it to her ear. "Major General Whitaker, verifying identity. Ready for briefing," she said, her voice low and steady, the way she'd done 100 times before. On the other end, a Pentagon officer began relaying sensitive updates, coordinates, timelines, things only a handful of people in the country were cleared to hear. Karen kept her eyes moving, scanning the lot out of habit, her training kicking in even in a sleepy town like Fairview. She didn't notice the curious glances from the locals or the way the conversation paused when she paced a few steps. Inside the store, Donna Pritchard, a wiry woman in her 60s with a tight gray ponytail, watched from behind the counter. Her eyes narrowed as she studied Karen, her clothes, her posture, the way she spoke into the phone with quiet authority. To Donna, Karen didn't fit the usual crowd that stopped by for gas or a pack of smokes. She didn't see a decorated Air Force officer or a woman on a critical call. She saw what she wanted to see: trouble. Without a second thought, Donna picked up the store's old rotary phone and dialed the Fairview Police Department. "Yeah, there's a woman out here acting real suspicious," she muttered, keeping her voice low so the customers wouldn't hear. "Talking on her phone, pacing around. Might be up to no good. Y'all should come check." She hung up quickly, her lips pursed, already convinced she'd done the right thing. Karen Whitaker stood by her rental car in the gravel lot of Pritchard's Quick Stop, her secure phone pressed to her ear as the Pentagon officer's voice crackled with classified details. The late afternoon sun beat down on Fairview, Tennessee, and the air felt thick with humidity. She paced a few steps, keeping her voice low and her eyes scanning the lot out of habit, unaware that trouble was already brewing. Inside the store, Donna Pritchard's call to the Fairview Police Department had set things in motion. Within minutes, a police cruiser roared into the lot, tires crunching against the gravel, red and blue lights flashing bright against the faded storefront. Karen lowered her phone slightly, squinting at the sudden commotion. Her heart sank, but she kept her composure, years of training kicking in. 2 officers stepped out of the cruiser before it had fully stopped. Chief Mark Hensley, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl, led the way. His younger partner, Amy Larson, a lean 28-year-old with a rookie's eagerness, followed close behind, her hand resting on her holster. Mark's eyes locked on Karen immediately, sizing her up as if she'd already broken some unspoken rule. The locals by the store, 3 men in flannel shirts and a woman with a toddler, stopped talking, their gazes shifting between Karen and the officers. A pickup truck slowed on the highway, its driver craning his neck to watch. Karen felt the air tighten around her, but she stayed calm, placing her phone on the car's hood and keeping her hands visible, palms open. "Good afternoon, officers," she said, her voice steady, professional. "Is there a problem?" Mark didn't answer right away. He strode closer, his boots kicking up dust. "ID and registration, now!" he barked, his tone sharp enough to make the toddler flinch. Karen nodded, moving slowly to reach for her wallet in her back pocket. "Absolutely. My ID's right here. I'm Major General Karen Whitaker, U.S. Air Force, on official business." She pulled out her military credentials and federal travel orders, holding them out with steady hands. The documents were crisp, official, with the Department of Defense seal clear as day. Amy stepped forward, glancing at the papers, but Mark snatched them from Karen's hand, barely looking at them. "Major General, huh?" Mark said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He tossed the ID onto the hood like it was junk mail. "You expect us to buy that?" Amy smirked, folding her arms. "Looks fake to me," she added, though her eyes flickered with a hint of uncertainty. Karen blinked, stunned but refusing to let it show. "Officers, those are valid credentials. Please verify them with your supervisor." Her voice stayed even, but inside, a flicker of anger stirred. She'd faced skepticism before, but this was different, raw, deliberate. Mark cut her off. "Enough, step away from the car." The crowd grew, now a dozen people, some pulling out their phones, recording the scene. A man in a trucker hat whispered to his friend, "She don't look like no general." Karen tried again. "Please, contact Arnold Air Force Base. They'll confirm my identity." But Mark was already reaching for his cuffs. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Karen didn't move, not out of defiance, but because something inside her tightened, a mix of humiliation and resolve. "I'm a United States Air Force officer," she said, her voice sharper now. "You're making a mistake." Mark laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the lot. "Yeah, and I'm the governor. Turn around!" Before she could respond, Amy grabbed her arm, her grip tighter than necessary. Mark forced Karen's other wrist behind her back, snapping the cuffs on hard enough to pinch her skin. Karen clenched her jaw, swallowing the flood of emotions rising in her chest. The crowd murmured, some chuckling, others shifting uncomfortably. A teenage girl filming on her phone gasped as Karen's phone slid off the hood, hitting the gravel with a dull thud, the Pentagon line still open, but now just static. Mark shoved Karen against the car, her shoulder hitting the door with a jolt. "Got her," Amy said, her voice smug but shaky. Karen stared at the store's grimy window, her reflection distorted in the glass. In that moment, she wasn't a general, wasn't a veteran of 25 years. She was just a woman in handcuffs, judged by people who'd already made up their minds. The gravel lot of Pritchard's Quick Stop in Fairview, Tennessee, buzzed with tension as Major General Karen Whitaker stood handcuffed against her rental car, her shoulder aching from where Chief Mark Hensley had shoved her. The late afternoon sun glinted off the police cruiser's flashing lights, painting the scene in stark reds and blues. A small crowd of locals watched, some filming on their phones, their whispers blending with the hum of Highway 70 traffic. Karen's secure phone lay in the dirt, its screen cracked, the open line to the Pentagon now silent. She kept her eyes forward, her jaw tight, refusing to give Mark or his rookie partner, Amy Larson, the satisfaction of seeing her break. But inside, The weight of the moment pressed hard. 25 years of service reduced to this humiliating misunderstanding. Back in Washington, D.C., the Pentagon's command center was anything but quiet. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Nguyen, a 35-year-old officer with a knack for staying calm under pressure, stared at her monitor, where a blinking alert marked Karen's secure line. The audio had cut from clear briefing to chaos, shouts, scuffling, then nothing. Sarah's stomach twisted. "Major General Whitaker, this is command. Do you copy?" she said into her headset, her voice steady but urgent. No response. She glanced at her supervisor, Colonel Robert Vance, a gray-haired veteran who was already crossing the room, his face grim. "Ping her location," he ordered, his voice cutting through the hum of computers and murmured conversations. A technician's fingers flew across a keyboard, and within seconds, a map zoomed in on a dot just off Highway 70 in Fairview, Tennessee, not Arnold Air Force Base, but a convenience store 60 miles away. "Fairview?" Vance muttered, frowning. "What's she doing there?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "Sir, we've got a dropped secure line and no response. We need to assume she's in trouble." Vance nodded, his jaw tight. "Get Arnold Security on the line. Patch me through to their CO, and alert JAG. This could be a mess." The technician dialed the number for Arnold Air Force Base, and within moments, Colonel James Callahan, the base's head of security, was on the line. Vance didn't waste words. "Colonel, we've lost contact with Major General Whitaker. Her last known location is a convenience store in Fairview. We need your team there now." Callahan, a no-nonsense officer in his mid-40s, didn't ask questions. "Understood. My team's rolling out. ETA 20 minutes. He hung up, already barking orders to his unit. Back at Pritchard's, Mark Hensley loomed over Karen, his boots scuffing the gravel. "What's your real name, lady?" he demanded, ignoring her military ID still lying on the car hood. Karen exhaled slowly, her voice low but firm. "You have my credentials. Check them." Amy, standing a few feet away, shifted nervously, her earlier confidence fading as she noticed the crowd's growing unease. A woman in the back whispered, "She said she's military. Why ain't they listening?" But Mark wasn't listening either. He scoffed, turning to Amy. "She's stalling. Probably got warrants." Before Karen could respond, his radio crackled to life. "Unit 4, confirm status of detained subject at Pritchard's Quick Stop." Mark grabbed the radio. "Female, mid-40s, uncooperative. Possible false ID." A pause. Then the dispatcher's voice came back, clipped and urgent. "Be advised, subject is flagged federal. Repeat, flagged federal. Pentagon's on the line. Release her immediately and stand by for orders." Mark froze, his face paling. Amy's eyes widened, her hand hovering near her holster. "What?" she muttered, glancing at Karen, who stood still, her gaze unwavering. The crowd grew quieter, sensing the shift. Karen said nothing, but her silence carried a weight that made Mark's hands tremble as he fumbled with his radio. In the distance, the faint rumble of engines grew louder. Black SUVs from Arnold Air Force Base, speeding toward Fairview with Colonel Callahan at the lead. The clock was ticking, and Mark and Amy were about to learn just how big a mistake they'd made. The gravel lot at Pritchard's Quick Stop in Fairview, Tennessee, was thick with tension as Major General Karen Whitaker stood handcuffed, her wrists aching from the tight metal cuffs. The crowd of locals, now nearly 20 strong, watched in uneasy silence, some still filming on their phones. Chief Mark Hensley's radio had just crackled with the dispatcher's urgent order to release Karen, a flagged federal subject tied to the Pentagon. Mark's face drained of color, his hands shaking as he clutched the radio. Amy Larson, his rookie partner, looked like she'd swallowed a stone, her eyes darting between Karen and the crowd. Karen stood tall, her expression calm but unyielding, her military training holding her steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. The distant rumble of engines grew louder, signaling the arrival of help. Before Mark could act, A convoy of 3 black SUVs screeched into the lot, tires kicking up clouds of dust. The doors swung open, and Colonel James Callahan, a sharp-eyed officer from Arnold Air Force Base, stepped out, his Air Force uniform crisp despite the Tennessee heat. 6 security officers followed, their movements swift and precise, forming a protective semicircle around Karen. Callahan's gaze locked on her first. "Major General Whitaker, are you injured?" he asked, his voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. Karen shook her head, her voice steady. "Minor bruising, Colonel. Their careers will hurt worse." The words landed like a punch, and Mark flinched, his bravado gone. Callahan turned to the officers, his face hard as stone. "Uncuff her, now!" Mark fumbled with his keys, his fingers clumsy as he unlocked the cuffs. The metal clicked open, and Karen flexed her wrists, red marks visible where the cuffs had bitten into her skin. Amy muttered, "Ma'am, we didn't know." But her words trailed off under Karen's piercing stare. Mark tried to add, "It was a misunderstanding," but Callahan cut him off. "You had her credentials. You chose to ignore them. Step classic case of jumping to conclusions." The crowd was dead silent now, the locals shifting uncomfortably. Donna Pritchard, the store clerk who'd called the cops, slipped back inside the store, her face pale, avoiding Karen's gaze. Karen picked up her cracked phone from the gravel, brushing off the dirt. The Pentagon line was dead, a security breach she'd have to report later. She looked at Mark and Amy, her voice low but razor sharp. "You'll answer for this." "Today?" Mark opened his mouth, then closed it, his shoulders slumping. Callahan gestured to his team. "Escort General Whitaker to the vehicle." The security officers flanked her, guiding her to an SUV with quiet efficiency. As Karen stepped inside, she glanced back at the lot. Mark wiping sweat from his brow, Amy staring at the ground, and the crowd dispersing, some shaking their heads. She settled into the SUV's leather seat, the door closing with a solid thud. Callahan climbed in beside her, his expression softening slightly. "Pentagon's already coordinating with JAG, ma'am. This won't stay quiet." Karen nodded, staring out the window at the fading sign for Pritchard's quick stop. "They should have known better," she said, her voice carrying the weight of her 25 years of service. The convoy pulled out, speeding toward Arnold Air Force Base, where Karen's dignity and her fight would begin anew. The black SUVs carrying Major General Karen Whitaker sped away from Pritchard's quick stop, leaving the dusty lot in Fairview, Tennessee behind. The red marks on Karen's wrists still stung from the handcuffs, but her focus was elsewhere, on the cracked, secure phone in her hand and the bigger battle she knew was coming. The incident had been anything but quiet. One of the locals, a teenage girl with a smartphone, had uploaded her video of Karen's detainment to social media before the SUVs even reached Highway 70. The grainy footage, showing Chief Mark Hensley and Officer Amy Larson cuffing a calm, composed black woman who identified herself as an Air Force general, spread like wildfire. By the time Karen arrived at Arnold Air Force Base, 60 miles away, the video had racked up thousands of views, shares, and angry comments across platforms. Back in Fairview, the small town of 9,000 was no longer just a blip on the map. News vans from Nashville, only 40 miles north, rolled into town before nightfall, their satellite dishes sprouting like weeds outside the Fairview Police Department. National outlets like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC picked up the story, running the video on loop with headlines like "Air Force General Wrongfully Detained in Tennessee" and "Racial Profiling Sparks Outrage." Commentators dissected the footage, pointing out Karen's clear presentation of her military ID and the officer's dismissive response. Civil rights groups, including the NAACP's Tennessee chapter, issued statements calling the incident a textbook case of racial bias and abuse of power. Veterans organizations, usually slow to weigh in, released a joint letter demanding accountability for the disgraceful treatment of a decorated officer. The Fairview Police Department scrambled to respond. Chief Vernon Tate, a 62-year-old with a handlebar mustache and a deer hunting hobby, stood outside the station in a hastily called press conference, his uniform damp with sweat under the camera lights. "We regret any confusion caused by this incident," he said, reading from a prepared statement, his eyes avoiding the reporters. "Officers Hensley and Larson have been placed on administrative leave while we conduct a full review." A reporter from the Tennessean cut in. "Chief, why did your officers ignore valid military credentials? Was race a factor?" Tate stammered, mumbling about high-pressure situations and mistaken identity. But his words fell flat, drowned out by the crowd's murmurs and the hum of news drones overhead. Mark and Amy, now named in every major report, went silent, their social media accounts deleted by morning. Leaked records from inside the department revealed prior complaints against Mark, 2 for excessive force, 1 for racial profiling, all quietly dismissed. Amy, though newer, had a reputation for following Mark's lead without question. The Department of Justice announced a federal investigation into the incident, citing possible civil rights violations. Tennessee's governor, a moderate Republican, called the event a stain on our state's values in a rare public statement, urging a thorough review. Fairview's community split. Some residents defended the officers, claiming they were just doing their job, while others, including a local black church group, held a candlelight vigil outside Pritchard's Quick Stop, apologizing for the town's actions. Karen, now at Arnold Air Force Base, was briefed by her legal team and Pentagon liaisons. The cracked phone, a potential security breach, was already under review, but the bigger issue was the public firestorm. She sat in a quiet office, staring at her reflection in a window, the weight of the day settling heavy. It wasn't just about her. It was about every person who'd been judged, dismissed, or humiliated for who they were. The video, now viral with millions of views, had turned her story into a national reckoning. Karen knew she'd have to speak soon, not just for herself, but for those watching, waiting for someone to stand tall. The fight for justice was just beginning, and Fairview would never be the same. The gates of Arnold Air Force Base in Tennessee stood tall under a clear Saturday sky, the air warm and heavy with anticipation. Major General Karen Whitaker, now 48 hours removed from her wrongful detainment at Pritchard's Quick Stop in Fairview, prepared to face the world. The viral video of her being handcuffed by Chief Mark Hensley and Officer Amy Larson had ignited a national firestorm, with millions of views and heated debates about race, power, and justice. News trucks from Nashville, Atlanta, and even New York lined the road outside the base, their cameras trained on a simple podium set up for a press conference at noon. Microphones clustered like a small forest, and reporters murmured into headsets, their notepads ready. Karen, for the first time in months, wore her full Air Force dress uniform, the deep blue fabric adorned with medals that gleamed in the sunlight. Her shoulders were squared, her face calm but resolute, a testament to 25 years of service. Inside the base, Karen had spent the morning with her legal team, Pentagon officials, and Colonel James Callahan, who'd led her rescue from Fairview. They offered her carefully crafted talking points, safe, diplomatic words to navigate the media storm. She listened politely, then set them aside. This wasn't about playing it safe. This was about truth, and she'd speak it on her terms. As she stepped toward the podium, the crowd, reporters, local residents, veterans, and civil rights advocates, fell silent. Colonel Callahan stood to her right, arms crossed, his presence a quiet show of support. A few Pentagon officers flanked him, their faces stern. Behind the cameras, Fairview residents held signs, "Justice for General Whitaker," and "Fairview must change." A black family from nearby Manchester stood with their teenage son, his eyes fixed on Karen, hopeful. Karen gripped the podium, her gaze steady as she began. "My name is Major General Karen Whitaker, United States Air Force," she said, her voice clear, cutting through the hum of distant traffic. For 25 years, I've served this country, leading airmen, advising commanders, defending the values we hold dear. She paused, letting the words settle. 2 days ago, in Fairview, Tennessee, none of that mattered. The crowd leaned in, reporters scribbling furiously. I was judged not by my service, not by my character, but by the color of my skin and assumptions made before I could speak. Her words were measured, but carried a weight that silenced even the rustling of papers. I'm not here for apologies, she continued, her eyes scanning the crowd. I'm here because silence isn't an option. Accountability matters, respect matters, dignity matters, and none of these should be negotiable because of someone's prejudice. She spoke to the cameras, but her words reached beyond. To the millions who'd seen the video, to those who'd felt the sting of being dismissed or dehumanized. A woman in the crowd, a retired teacher, wiped her eyes. A young veteran in a wheelchair nodded, clutching a folded American flag. Karen's voice grew firmer. Injustice isn't new, but change comes when we refuse to look away, when we demand better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. She stepped back, her medals catching the light. Those officers didn't just humiliate me, they humiliated themselves, and history will remember it that way. The applause started small, a few claps from the back, then swelled into a wave, loud and alive. Karen didn't smile or linger. She turned from the podium, her steps steady, as Callahan and the officers followed her back toward the base. The crowd kept clapping, some shouting her name. A girl with a sign raised it higher, her face beaming with pride. Karen caught her eye and gave a small nod, a silent promise to keep fighting. As she walked away, Karen knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Department of Justice was investigating, and Fairview's police department faced mounting pressure. But her words had struck a chord, rippling far beyond Tennessee. She wasn't just a general now, she was a voice for those who'd been silenced. The fight for justice, for dignity would go on, and Karen Whitaker would lead it, one steady step at a time, carrying the hopes of countless others who believed in a better America. Karen Whitaker's press conference at Arnold Air Force Base echoed far beyond the Tennessee hills, her words a beacon for those who'd ever felt unseen or unheard. As she walked back through the base gates, the applause fading behind her, she carried a quiet resolve. Her story wasn't just about one wrongful detainment, it was a call to stand firm against injustice, to demand respect, and to hold those in power accountable. The lesson was clear. Dignity isn't given, it's earned through courage and truth, even when the odds feel stacked against you. Karen's refusal to stay silent showed that one voice, grounded in principle, can spark change, inspiring others to speak up in their own communities. Whether it's challenging bias, supporting the marginalized, or simply listening, everyone has a role in building a fairer world. Her fight reminds us that progress starts with ordinary people choosing to act, to be the change they want to see. If Karen's story moved you, subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch more stories of resilience and justice. Hit that button, join our community, and let's keep shining a light on what matters. Together, we can make a difference.